Pre-calculus, chapter 4, lesson 3, and we've been doing a lot of work with coterminal angles and points in the coordinate plane and using reference triangles to determine the trig ratios and tying all that together. Now, we began our discussion in chapter 4 talking about the difficulty with degree measure not representing or being connected to the output of the length compared to the length of the radius or anything like that. And we talked about introducing radian measure because with radian measure then there was a connection between the length of the radius and then the measure of the arc or the measure of the angle and then the arc that's intercepted or the length of the arc on the circle. And so to tie all these things together, then we want to now take a look at putting these trig ratios to work on a circle for us. Now we're going to introduce what we call the unit circle, and basically we talked about quadrantal angles of choosing an R of 1, and by doing that we were able to determine the trigonometric ratios of these quadrantal angles where we were not able to draw a triangle. If we extend that concept, the fact that this radius or this length is going to be 1, and we then put a circle on this, oops, I didn't want to do that. Then what we create here on what we call the unit circle, and we call it a unit circle because the radius is 1, is that everywhere on this circle the R value is a 1. So no matter what coordinate I choose here, if I have the x and the y, if the R value is 1, then we really don't even need to consider that. The ratios are going to be, remember, the cosine related to the x, so this coordinate is really just going to be the cosine of theta over 1, and so we don't really need to worry about anything else. This is why we wanted to make the connection that the x value is connected to the cosine. And then the y coordinate of this point is simply the sine of the angle because the radius is 1. You remember y over the r, and if the r is 1, then any point on the circle really has the coordinate of the cosine of the angle will be the x value, and the sine of the coordinate will be the y value. So no matter where you go on this circle, because the radius is 1, you can simply calculate then the 6 trigonometric ratios by doing this. The sine is going to be the y, the cosine is going to be the x, and the tangent is going to be y over x. And then the reciprocal functions are easily determined because the reciprocal then would just be 1 over y. The secant reciprocal would be 1 over x, and then the cotangent of theta would simply be x over y. So when we have an R of 1, or we have what we call a unit circle, we no longer need essentially those triangles because now we have a connection to the angles on the circle and then a point on the circle. Now you remember that if we use degrees there was no connection. The only time that there's this connection is if we're using radian measure. As far as the angle in radians then is the length of this arc or this angle here, these are all the same measure. So moving forward we're going to deal almost exclusively with radian measure, so it's important that you remember those radian measures. Okay, so we then begin to unlock the power of trigonometry from the triangles, but now we start to unlock them in terms of a circle. And we've talked about the fact that because if I have this theta angle here, and I know that the cosine theta and the y theta is this coordinate here, then again, because if we're in a circle, if we add 360 degrees, we come back around, we have the same sine and the same cosine because these angles are what we call, or these functions are periodic. They repeat in a certain period, and that's going to be important when we start to look at their graphs in the next lesson. So that's kind of tying together everything that we've done so far and putting them on the unit circle. The better you are at remembering these trigonometric ratios apart from having to draw a reference triangle, the quicker and the better you'll be able to do them. As I said before, when we say what's the sine of the 30, automatically you should be able to go that's 1/2 or 0.5. Cosine of the 30 we should know is radical 3 over 2. Cosine of the 45 and the sine of the cos 45 are both 1 over the square root of 2. And as you know these and can rattle them off in your quickly, that's going to make your trigonometry that much easier. The more you do trigonometry, the more you'll use these, the more you'll see how often they come into play. And again, your trigonometry is really going to come down to these special radian measures and knowing the sines and the cosine values of these and being able to do them very quickly. Again, as you're beginning and even as you go forward, you always have the ability, and the option is to draw a reference triangle and then put the measures in and then be able to get those from there. So reference triangles are very helpful and a needed tool. There's nothing wrong with using them. I'm just saying that if you can memorize those, then your trigonometry is going to be that much quicker because you're not going to have to draw these reference triangles. Okay, so just wanted to tie all that together in the unit circle, and that's going to wrap up lesson 4.3. In the next lesson, we'll begin to look at the graphs of these trigonometric functions.